to everyone once again. Hello, Paul. You are in the industry for over 20 years. You are the member of the main group of standardization according to trust services. Can you, in the first words, translate us what are these mythical QVACs? What are the role of this solution in the electronic services market at all?
Yeah. So when we talk about QVACs, it's an abbreviation for Qualified Web Authentication Certificates. Very long for the SSL or TLS certificates we have been using for decades, and they secure the transaction by encrypting or facilitating encryption, but mainly also the authentication of the site behind that. Within a qualified certificate, so a qualified web authentication certificate, one of the main purposes is to have that high level of assurance of knowing who you're dealing with.
Okay, and can you tell us what is the state of the market right now? Because we know what solution we are using, yes, as a users, yeah. And can you tell us some more information about the plans of changing the situation in the market, in the European market mainly?
So if we look at QVACs, they're mostly based on the extended validation certificates, the EV certificates that were introduced many, many years ago. They provide also a high level of assurance and are mostly based on web trust audits and standardized through the CA browser forum. QVACs and EV certificates both exist in the market, and but the browsers decided a couple of years back to remove the special UI treatment, the identity UI, from the browsers, which prevents the user and the European citizen from actually knowing who they're dealing with. While they can still find the information, they have to click a couple of times, 5, 7, depending which browser you're using, to actually find the information. And because it's different in every browser, its user awareness is like very problematic.
So as I understand, during our conference we had a lot of talks about the eIDAS 2, the changes which are to be done during this regulation. Could you tell us what are the, according to QVACs, what are the main challenges, what are the plans of European Commission to give new requirements according to the subject?
Yeah, so in the eIDAS 2, or the proposed eIDAS 2 by the Commission, we have Article 45. And Article 45, like in eIDAS 1, talks about the qualified web authentication certificates. The article is composed of two elements. One is the recognition of QVACs, and the other one is the display of the identity UI. That is to, as written in Article 45, to facilitate the QVAC adoption in the market. The question is, what does that mean, right? So if we're looking at recognition, then you could talk about, well, that is the recognition of the supervision framework. In eIDAS, we have a standard, a regulation which is defined and applicable to everyone in Europe automatically. That is standardized through ETSI and some other implementing acts that delegate specifications. Then we have the conformity assessment bodies who check if what is the qualified trust service provider or the trust service provider is doing is also conforming those standards and conforming the regulation. And then we also have the supervisory bodies from the national member states who then eventually issue the license to issue qualified web authentication certificates by verifying the report of the conformity assessment body. And they will put the trust service provider then on the trusted lists as we have in Europe.
So as I understand, we are trying to implement our European standards, yes, based on our European law and let's say rules like according to privacy, GDPR, yes, or right to know with whom I am talking through the website, yes. And we are trying to, let's say, convince the market to push these regulations. But on the other side, we have, let's say, a big tech companies which work on their, let's say, standards, on their way of thinking, of acting. Do you think it is possible to find a way of compromise, or let's say trying to negotiate the best way for the every player on the market? Is it possible during the process of let's say discussion during the next, I don't know, few months? Yes, we still have.
It's a challenging process. It's highly debated. There are many different opinions from different stakeholders. And actually, I think sometimes we're looking at it from completely the wrong angle. Like, on one side, we have browsers who are billion-dollar companies. They have stakes in performance, in usability, but also in security. We have qualified trust service providers who are commercial entities often, who also make money off selling those certificates. We have QX for the adoption of certificates. Or QX, we have the wallets coming in the IDAS2, and using the wallet, it would be easier to obtain that QX and to perform that in automation. If we're looking at the discussion, I think definitely there are discussions going on what is needed. And let's say in eIDAS 1, it was already required for browsers or root programs, but mainly, well, the browser that is facilitating the user and accessing the window to the internet. It's what we all use on a day-to-day basis, to comply with European law. Well, we first start then with the fundamental rights of the European Union. And that is a very small document that has some simple statements, such as we have the right on privacy. But more important, consumers need to be protected. From there, we see that we have an Internal Market Act, we have Consumer Protection Acts, we have the Data Protection Act, the GDPR, and go on, many, many more. And one thing they all state is that as a consumer, you need to know, or you need to have the ability to know what you're dealing with. So we can say, actually, in eIDAS 1, the browsers are in breach of regulation in Europe. Well, if we then look into Germany, we have the Bundeskartellamt. And the Bundeskartellamt is like the antitrust body in Germany. And they started an investigation to one browser to see, well, why are they not complying, or they seem not to be complying, or are they complying? They're investigating. If these browsers are actually dealing and having a fair mechanism for users, but also for competition and the treatment of qualified trust service providers, for example, by removing the identity UI, but also their additional root program rules. What's very interesting is of that antitrust body, what they stated is that they would stop the investigation at that time, which was a couple of months ago, in light of eIDAS 2 Article 45. So assuming that Article 45 will be implemented as it is, they will not pursue their investigation towards that browser. Because what they want is that this is regulated at European level, not in Germany locally, or not for a single browser. But this needs to be industry or regulated by law.
Okay. Also, there are the voices that, for example, that the display of identity data to users can, let's say, provoke some risks on the, let's say, cybersecurity level. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so there are two concerns raised by the browsers and the Electronic Frontier Foundation, saying, one, if we need to accept browsers from the European trust list, that will break the internet. It will endanger the internet as we know it. Well, the question is why, because that's not what they state. While they make some assumptions about rogue states and government CAs that could be embedded, while we have a supervision framework in Europe, there is collaboration between all the parties. So why would that be a problem? And if a rogue state would ask tomorrow, or demand tomorrow, they would write a regulation and say, we need to be embedded, you need to trust us and all our CAs. And the browsers say, well, we don't think your trust framework is trustworthy. There's enough supervision, or we would want you to do that. And that rogue state is not willing to cooperate with that. Well, they can say, we don't distribute our browser there. They're not required to do that. So I think that is one argument. And then you have what they also say, the identity UI. Previously, they stated extended validations, certificates, as we talked about before, they're flawed. They don't work. They can be compromised. They're not trustworthy. And what else they said? And they have done some trials, and I agree. It's not perfect. The world is not perfect. We need to look at what we do and how we can improve it. But go back to the regulation, the fundamental rights of a European citizen. We have the right to know who we're dealing with. And that doesn't mean that we need to be taught on clicking 5 buttons before we can find that information. We need to be informed. And that can be at several stages. And again, I'm not saying that EV is the way to do this, but there needs to be an UI. That UI probably needs to be standardized. There needs to be a framework defined by, or maybe the EU, or by maybe ETSI, or maybe just let's collaborate, get broad industry consensus. That's similar to root program rules. Browsers have done a really good job. They have improved security in the last couple of decades significantly. And let's continue that, but let's collaborate and let's comply with European regulation that we have, and that is existing for many years. And so if we can standardize the UI so that someone, a citizen, can see this on their mobile, on their tablet, but also independent of which browser they are using, that they can simply know that they're dealing with a trusted organization, and maybe that should even state, this is a financial institution, like it has a bank license, or maybe this is a recognized healthcare organization, and the wallet at the stations might be able to support that mechanism. And that's where we need to collaborate. So let's have the root programs bring their rules in a standardization, like in ETSI or in the CA browser forum, and let's not make decisions unilaterally. Let's work together to a better industry, a better security for everyone, but especially in this case, the European citizen, because that is the primary person that we're talking about. It's not about the browsers, it's not about qualified trust service providers. It's even not about the government, it's about the citizen. That's the one that needs to have trust and need to know who they're dealing with. Because if you're talking to someone, when I was a kid, my parents told me, don't talk to strangers. If someone approaches you on the street, don't trust them because you don't know who it is. Don't answer the phone and start giving information. That's the same thing here on the internet. It's not strange. We've been doing this for years and teaching our kids to do that.
So maybe you can see it as a very technical discussion, but at the end, maybe it's a, let's say, even political discussion, how to cooperate in this, let's say, Atlantic sphere, yes, because we are talking about a discussion between Europe government, let's say, or governmental bodies and commercial companies from USA. So maybe it's also the interesting place for cooperation between also these two regions and companies and subjects from these two.
Yeah, we need to more collaborate, more harmonize, but especially you don't have commercial entities with commercial interest make unilateral decisions that impact the entire world and the security of the entire world. Because maybe we have one leading browser today, it might be another one from another continent tomorrow. And what will their rules be? We don't know. They can decide something completely different. Regulation is needed here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.